Her cruel father sold the obese 16-year-old to a lone rancher. But he had plans no one expected. The small town sat quietly between wide fields and dusty roads that seemed to stretch forever. Most people there knew each other, and secrets rarely stayed hidden for long. In one old house at the edge of town lived a 16-year-old girl who felt like she did not belong anywhere. Her name was Leela, and she spent most of her days trying to stay unnoticed. Leela was not like the other teenagers in her school. She was heavier than most girls her age, and she moved slowly, always careful not to draw attention to herself. Some classmates whispered behind her back, while others simply ignored her. Over time, she learned to keep her head down and avoid conversations. Silence felt safer than facing judgment. At home, things were not better. Her father believed strength meant harshness. He rarely smiled and spoke mostly in short, cold sentences. Since Leela's mother had passed away years earlier, the house had become quieter and heavier with tension. Meals were simple and often eaten without conversation. The walls seemed to hold memories of laughter that no longer existed. Her father struggled financially. The small construction jobs he took were irregular, and bills piled up on the kitchen table like silent reminders of failure. Instead of seeking comfort together, he grew more distant. To him, Leela represented another responsibility he felt unable to manage. Many evenings, Leela sat alone by the window, watching the sun fall behind the hills. She wondered what life felt like for people who were loved without conditions. She imagined different futures, but quickly pushed those thoughts away. Dreams felt dangerous when reality had never been kind. One afternoon, she overheard her father speaking on the phone. His voice was low, but certain words caught her attention. He mentioned a ranch far away and talked about work, payment, and arrangements. She felt a strange chill, but did not understand fully. When he ended the call, he looked at her differently, as if he had already made a decision she was not part of. Days passed before he finally spoke. He told her she would be leaving town to work at a ranch owned by a man who needed help. He explained it as an opportunity, saying she would learn useful skills and stop being a burden. His words were firm, leaving little space for discussion. Leela felt shock first, then fear. She wanted to ask questions, but years of silence held her back. Instead, she nodded quietly, pretending acceptance. Inside, her thoughts raced. She imagined long days of hard labor, strangers who might judge her, and loneliness even deeper than before. Yet part of her also felt a small spark of curiosity. Maybe leaving meant escaping the life she knew. The night before her departure, she packed a small suitcase. Most of her clothes were old and simple, but she folded them carefully. She paused when she reached a photograph of her mother, smiling warmly at the camera. Leela slipped it into her bag, feeling a sudden wave of emotion she could not name. The next morning arrived too quickly. Her father drove without speaking much. The road stretched endlessly, passing fields, small towns, and empty spaces that felt larger than her fears. She stared out the window, wondering if anyone would notice she was gone. Hours later, the truck turned onto a dirt road leading toward wide open land. The ranch appeared slowly, first as distant buildings, then as fences, barns, and grazing animals. The air felt different there, fresher and quieter. Leela's heart beat faster as they approached a simple house surrounded by trees. A man stood outside waiting. He was older, with weathered hands and calm eyes that observed without judgment. He introduced himself as Daniel, speaking in a gentle tone that surprised her. He did not stare at her body or make comments about her appearance. Instead, he greeted her politely and asked if the journey had been long. The conversation between Daniel and her father felt more like a business exchange than anything else. Papers were signed, brief words were spoken, and then her father turned to leave. There was no long goodbye, no comforting hug. The truck drove away, leaving a cloud of dust behind. Leela stood still, unsure what to do. She expected Daniel to give strict instructions or criticize her, but he simply handed her a glass of water and showed her the small room where she would stay. The space was simple but clean, with a bed near a window that faced the fields. He explained that she would help with daily tasks but would learn gradually. He said the ranch was a place where people worked together and respected effort. His calm voice made her feel slightly less afraid, though she remained cautious. That first evening, she walked outside alone, looking at the wide sky filled with colors she had never noticed before. The silence felt different from the silence at home. It was not heavy or cold. It felt open, almost welcoming. Dinner was quiet but comfortable. Daniel asked simple questions about what she liked to eat and whether she had ever been around animals before. When she admitted she had little experience, he nodded without disappointment. He explained that everyone starts somewhere and that learning takes time. Later that night, lying in bed, she waited for something to go wrong. She expected shouting, rules that felt impossible, or signs of anger. But the house remained peaceful. For the first time in a long while, she fell asleep without fear of being judged. The next morning began early. The sound of birds replaced the noise of traffic she was used to. She followed Daniel outside, watching as he fed horses and checked fences. The work looked hard, and she worried she would fail. He showed her small tasks first, guiding her patiently. When she struggled, he did not raise his voice. Instead, he adjusted his instructions and encouraged her to try again. As the day passed, she felt tired but strangely proud. No one had ever focused on what she could learn rather than what she lacked. Even small successes felt important. That evening, as she watched the sun set behind the fields, she realized something unexpected. The fear she carried had not disappeared, but it had softened. She began to wonder if the ranch might hold possibilities she had never imagined. She did not know yet what Daniel's true plans were, or why he had agreed to take her in. All she knew was that life had changed suddenly, and for the first time, change did not feel entirely frightening. The first few days on the ranch passed slowly, each moment filled with new experiences that felt both exciting and overwhelming for Leela. She woke early every morning, sometimes before the sun fully rose, listening to the quiet sounds of animals moving outside. At first, the early schedule felt difficult, but she noticed that the calm rhythm of ranch life made her feel more focused than she had ever felt before. Daniel believed in teaching through patience. Instead of giving long lectures, he showed her how to do things step by step. One morning, he taught her how to carry water buckets safely without hurting her back. Another day, he showed her how to brush a horse gently so it would trust her. He never rushed her, even when she made mistakes. Leela expected criticism whenever she failed because that was what she had known before. When she dropped a tool or forgot a step, she waited for disappointment. But Daniel simply smiled lightly and told her to try again. This small difference changed how she felt about learning. Instead of fear, she started feeling curiosity. The ranch itself became a place of discovery. Wide fields stretched toward the horizon, and the sky seemed larger than she had ever seen. She began to notice details she had never paid attention to before. The way the wind moved through tall grass, the sounds of birds calling to each other, and the peaceful silence that arrived at sunset. Physically, the work challenged her. Carrying feed, walking long distances, and lifting small equipment made her muscles sore. Some evenings she felt exhausted, unsure if she could continue. But slowly, she noticed small changes. Tasks that once felt impossible became manageable. She moved with more confidence, and her breathing grew steadier. One afternoon, while repairing a fence, she grew frustrated and nearly gave up. The wires felt heavy, and her hands shook with tiredness. Daniel noticed her struggle but did not immediately step in. Instead, he asked her what she thought was causing the problem. She hesitated, but then explained what she felt unsure about. He listened carefully and guided her to find the solution herself. That moment stayed with her. No one had ever asked for her opinion about anything important before. The idea that her thoughts mattered felt new and unfamiliar. In the evenings, they sometimes sat on the porch together. Conversations were simple but meaningful. Daniel rarely spoke about his past, but he shared small stories about ranch life, about learning through mistakes, and about respecting hard work. Leela found herself listening closely, feeling safe enough to ask questions. She also began visiting the nearby town once a week to buy supplies. At first, she felt nervous about being seen by strangers. Old fears returned, and she worried people would judge her. But the town was different from what she expected. Some shopkeepers greeted her kindly, and a woman at a small cafe remembered her name after only one visit. These small acts of kindness slowly softened the protective walls she had built around herself. One evening, while looking through old boxes in the storage barn, Leela found notebooks filled with drawings and plans. They belonged to Daniel. The pages showed careful sketches of buildings, animals, and even lessons written in simple words. She realized he approached ranch life not just as work, but as something thoughtful and creative. When she asked about the notebooks, Daniel explained that writing helped him think clearly. He encouraged her to try writing her own thoughts. That night, she found a blank notebook and began writing small entries about her days. At first, the words felt awkward, but soon she discovered that writing helped her understand her feelings. Weeks passed, and her routine became familiar. She woke early, completed chores, learned new skills, and ended each day with quiet reflection. The physical activity began changing her posture and energy. More importantly, her mindset started shifting. She no longer saw herself only as someone who struggled. She began seeing herself as someone capable of growth. Despite the positive changes, uncertainty remained. She still wondered why Daniel had agreed to take her in. His kindness felt genuine, but she struggled to trust fully because her past had taught her to expect hidden motives. Sometimes she watched him carefully, searching for signs of anger or disappointment, but she rarely found any. One rainy afternoon, when outdoor work became impossible, Daniel suggested they cook together. He showed her how to prepare simple meals using fresh ingredients from the ranch. The kitchen filled with warm smells, and laughter came unexpectedly when she accidentally added too much seasoning. Moments like that felt unfamiliar but comforting. During another visit to town, she overheard two people talking about Daniel. They described him as someone who had faced great loss years ago but had chosen to live quietly instead of becoming bitter. Hearing that made her curious, but she did not ask him directly. She sensed that some stories needed time before they could be shared. As days turned into weeks, Leela began noticing something surprising. She no longer counted hours until bedtime or waited for days to pass. Instead, she looked forward to learning new tasks and seeing progress. Each accomplishment, even small ones like fixing a gate or guiding a horse calmly, gave her a sense of pride she had never known. One evening, after finishing chores, Daniel handed her a small envelope. Inside was payment for her work. She stared at it in disbelief. No one had ever trusted her with her own earnings before. He explained that the money belonged to her and that she should start planning for her future. The idea that she had control over something in her life felt powerful. That night, she sat by the window, holding the envelope and thinking about everything that had changed since arriving. She remembered the fear she felt when leaving home and compared it to the quiet strength she now felt growing inside her. The transformation was not dramatic or sudden. It was slow, built from many small moments of encouragement. Yet challenges still existed. Some days she felt self-doubt return unexpectedly. A careless comment from a stranger or a difficult task could bring back old insecurities. But now she had tools to face those feelings. Instead of hiding, she tried again. As the sun set one evening, painting the sky in soft colors, she realized that the ranch had become more than just a place of work. It had become a space where she could learn who she truly was, away from labels and expectations. Still, questions remained about the future and about the father she had left behind. She did not know whether he would return or what he might demand. For now, she focused on the present, determined to continue growing stronger each day. Standing near the fence, watching horses move freely across the field, she felt something she had rarely felt before: hope. It was quiet and gentle, but it was real. Time passed quietly on the ranch, and the steady rhythm of work slowly shaped Leela into a different person. The girl who had first arrived nervous and uncertain now moved across the fields with more confidence. She still faced challenges, but she no longer believed every mistake meant failure. Each new day gave her another chance to grow. One morning, as she helped guide a group of horses into a fenced area, she noticed how naturally her body moved. Tasks that once made her feel embarrassed now felt familiar. She understood how to hold the rope properly, how to stand calmly so animals trusted her, and how to listen to Daniel's instructions without fear. When she realized this change, she smiled to herself, feeling proud in a quiet way. The nearby town also began to feel less intimidating. During weekly trips for supplies, she found herself speaking more comfortably with people. The cafe owner often asked about the ranch, and a young woman working at the grocery store started greeting her warmly. These small connections gave her a sense of belonging she had never experienced before. One afternoon, while sitting outside the cafe, she overheard a group of teenagers laughing nearby. For a moment, old memories returned, and she felt the familiar fear of being judged. But this time, instead of lowering her head, she stayed where she was. She reminded herself that she was not the same girl who had once hidden from everyone. The realization gave her strength. Back at the ranch, Daniel continued teaching her new skills. He introduced her to basic financial planning, showing her how to track her earnings and set goals. He explained that independence was not only about physical strength, but also about making wise decisions. Leela listened carefully, writing notes in the small notebook she had started keeping. As weeks passed, she noticed Daniel watching her progress with quiet pride. He never praised her in an exaggerated way, but his simple words of encouragement meant more than she expected. Sometimes he would say, "You handled that well," or "You are learning quickly." Those small sentences stayed with her long after the day ended. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sky darken, Daniel shared more about his past. He spoke slowly, choosing his words carefully. Years ago, he had lost people he cared about deeply, and the ranch had become a place where he could rebuild his life. He said that helping others find stability gave him purpose. Leela listened silently, understanding that his kindness came from experience rather than obligation. Around the same time, Leela began taking online classes using a small computer Daniel had set up for her. At first, she worried she would not understand the lessons, but she soon discovered she enjoyed learning. Subjects that once felt impossible now felt interesting when she approached them without fear. She stayed up late some nights, studying with determination. Her growing confidence did not mean everything became easy. Some days she felt overwhelmed by how much her life had changed. She wondered whether she truly deserved this new chance. During those moments, she returned to writing in her notebook, expressing thoughts she had never shared aloud. Writing became a quiet way to understand herself. The biggest challenge arrived unexpectedly. One afternoon, a letter came addressed to her. The handwriting was familiar and her heart tightened before she even opened it. It was from her father. His message was brief and demanding. He asked about her earnings and hinted that she should send money home. Reading his words brought back old feelings of fear and guilt. For hours she sat alone, unsure how to respond. When Daniel noticed her silence, he gently asked if something was wrong. She hesitated but eventually showed him the letter. He read it quietly and then handed it back without judgment. Instead of telling her what to do, he asked what she wanted for herself. The question surprised her. No one had ever asked her to consider her own wishes before. That evening, she thought deeply about the past and the future. She realized that while she cared about her father, she could not allow old patterns to control her again. The idea of setting boundaries felt frightening, but it also felt necessary. A few days later, she wrote a reply. Her words were respectful but firm. She explained that she was working hard and learning to become independent, and she would decide how to use her earnings. Writing those sentences felt like taking a step into unknown territory, but when she finished, she felt lighter. Meanwhile, life on the ranch continued to bring new experiences. One day, Daniel asked her to lead a small group of visitors during a short tour of the property. The idea terrified her at first. Speaking in front of others felt impossible. But he encouraged her to try, reminding her that growth often begins with discomfort. The day of the tour arrived, and her hands shook slightly as she greeted the visitors. She started slowly, explaining simple details about the animals and daily work. As she continued, her confidence grew. By the end, she realized she had spoken clearly and confidently. The visitors thanked her warmly, and she felt a strong sense of achievement. That night, she sat outside watching the stars. She thought about the girl she had been before arriving at the ranch and compared her to who she was becoming. The difference felt almost unreal. She was not perfect, and she still had doubts, but she no longer felt powerless. Despite her progress, a shadow of uncertainty remained. She wondered if her father would accept her boundaries or if he would try to regain control. The possibility created quiet tension, but instead of letting fear stop her, she focused on building strength and independence. As autumn approached, the fields changed color and the air grew cooler. The ranch felt peaceful, but beneath the calm, Leela sensed that new challenges were coming. Life had taught her that growth often brought unexpected tests. Standing near the fence one evening, she watched the horses run freely across the land. Their movement felt like a symbol of the freedom she was slowly discovering within herself. She realized that the greatest change was not how others saw her, but how she saw herself. For the first time in her life, she believed that her future could belong to her. The cool air of early autumn brought a quiet beauty to the ranch, But beneath that calm surface, change was beginning to move again. Leela had learned that peaceful days did not mean life would stay simple. Growth often invited new tests, and she sensed something approaching even before it arrived. The letter she had sent to her father had been respectful and clear. She had explained that she was working hard and learning to stand on her own. She had written that she would manage her earnings carefully and decide for herself how to use them. After mailing it, she felt strong for a few days. But strength can feel fragile when the past begins knocking again. 2 weeks later, a truck appeared at the edge of the ranch road. Leela was near the barn when she heard the engine. Her hands froze on the gate she was closing. She knew that sound. A heavy feeling settled in her chest before she even saw who stepped out of the vehicle. Her father walked toward the house with firm steps. His face looked tired, but his eyes carried the same sharp expression she remembered. Leela's heartbeat grew louder in her ears. For a brief moment, she felt like the same frightened girl who had left that old house months ago. Daniel stepped outside calmly, wiping his hands on a cloth. He did not rush, and he did not show anger. He simply stood beside Leela, offering quiet support without speaking for her. Her father began talking immediately. He said he had come to check on her and discuss arrangements. His words sounded polite on the surface, but Leela could hear the pressure underneath. He mentioned money and responsibility, repeating that he was still her parent. Leela swallowed hard. The air felt heavy, but she remembered the many evenings she had spent writing in her notebook, learning about independence and self-respect. She had practiced speaking clearly. Now she had to use that practice. She stepped forward slightly and answered him calmly. She told him she was safe. She told him she was working and learning. She explained that she appreciated concern, but she would make her own decisions about her earnings and her future. Her voice trembled at first, but it did not break. For the first time in her life, she was not speaking from fear. Her father seemed surprised by her tone. He was used to silence and obedience. He raised his voice slightly, saying she was too young to decide such things. But Leela did not step back. She repeated her words with quiet firmness. Daniel remained nearby but did not interrupt. His presence felt steady, like a strong tree beside her. He had once told her that true confidence grows when a person stands on their own. Now she understood what he meant. The conversation lasted longer than she expected. Her father tried different approaches: reason, guilt, frustration. But Leela answered calmly each time. She did not insult him. She did not shout. She simply stated her choice. Finally, he realized she would not bend easily. He warned that he might seek legal advice to regain control over her decisions. The words felt serious, and fear flickered in her mind again. But instead of collapsing under that fear, she looked at Daniel. After her father drove away, silence returned to the ranch. Leela's legs felt weak, and she sat down on the porch steps. The confrontation had drained her energy, but beneath the exhaustion was something powerful: relief. Daniel sat beside her and spoke gently. He explained that there were legal rights she should understand. At 16, she still had limited independence, but because she was working legally and living safely, her father could not simply remove her without reason. He suggested speaking to a local advisor who understood family laws. The idea of legal conversations felt intimidating, but Leela realized this was part of becoming independent. Avoiding difficult matters would only return her to old patterns. A few days later, they visited a trusted advisor in town. The woman who met them listened carefully as Leela explained her situation. For the first time, Leela told her story fully, about the emotional distance at home, about feeling unwanted, and about finding stability at the ranch. The advisor spoke kindly and explained her rights in simple language. She assured Leela that her safety and well-being were most important. If her current living arrangement supported her growth, the law would consider that. Hearing those words felt like someone opening a window in a dark room. Leela realized she was not trapped by her past. There were systems in place to protect young people who were working toward independence. In the following weeks, tension remained. Her father sent another message, insisting he would not give up easily, but this time, Leela did not panic. She kept focusing on her daily routine, feeding animals, studying in the evenings, and building her savings. The ranch community also began showing support. Word had quietly spread about her progress. The cafe owner asked how she was doing. The grocery store clerk encouraged her to continue her studies. Even a neighbor offered to help if legal questions became complicated. Leela began to see something she had never experienced before: community. People who barely knew her were willing to stand beside her because they had seen her effort and growth. One evening, as she repaired a fence under a golden sunset, Daniel finally shared the truth about his original plan. When her father had contacted him months ago, Daniel had sensed something deeper than a simple work arrangement. He had seen a young girl who needed a stable environment, not control. He explained that his intention was never to own her future, but to give her space to build one. He believed that sometimes people grow best when someone provides steady ground beneath their feet. Leela listened quietly. She realized that the unexpected part of this entire journey was not just her own transformation, but the simple power of patience and guidance. No grand promises, no dramatic speeches, just consistent support. As the season shifted further into autumn, her confidence strengthened. She continued her online classes and even started thinking about future goals. Maybe agricultural management, maybe education, maybe something she had not yet discovered. Then came the final turning point. Her father returned one last time, but his tone was different. The legal advisor had spoken to him, explaining that forcing control would only harm his relationship with his daughter. He stood at the edge of the yard, quieter than before. This time, Leela walked toward him without shaking. She spoke calmly and respectfully. She told him she did not hate him. She understood that life had been hard for him too, but she needed space to grow into her own person. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he nodded slowly. It was not a perfect resolution, and it did not erase years of distance. But it was a beginning. When he left again, the air felt lighter than it ever had. That evening, Leela stood alone in the open field, watching the sky turn soft shades of orange and purple. She realized that true strength did not mean fighting loudly. It meant standing steady, even when fear whispered in the background. The ranch no longer felt like a place she had been sent to. It felt like a place she had chosen. The ranch felt different that morning. The sun rose slowly over the hills, painting the fields in gold and orange. Leela walked along the fence, her hands brushing against the rough wood, and she noticed how calm the world seemed. There were no deadlines, no pressures from her father, no voices telling her she wasn't good enough. For the first time, the silence felt warm, not heavy. She thought about the months that had passed, the fear she had carried when leaving home, the awkward first days of chores, the exhaustion of learning, and the small victories that built her confidence. She had grown stronger physically, yes, but more importantly, she had grown emotionally. She understood now that her value was not determined by anyone else, but by her own choices and effort. Daniel appeared behind her quietly, carrying 2 mugs of warm tea. He smiled gently, the kind of smile that never demanded anything in return, only encouraged her to be herself. She accepted the mug and took a sip, feeling the warmth seep into her hands and chest. The taste was simple, but it symbolized everything the ranch had given her: a sense of care, stability, and patience. "I think you're ready for more responsibility," Daniel said after a moment, his voice calm but firm. "Not because I want to test you, but because you've shown you can handle it." Leela felt a surge of pride mixed with nervousness. Responsibility had always been something she feared. At home, responsibility had meant punishment if she failed, disappointment if she tried. Here it was different. Responsibility was trust, and trust was rare in her life. He handed her a small notebook. Inside were maps of the ranch, schedules for animal care, and notes about planting and harvesting. "I want you to start planning," Daniel said. "Think about what's best for the animals, the land, and yourself. You can make decisions. I'll be here to guide if needed, but the choices are yours." Leela opened the notebook carefully, her fingers trembling slightly. She realized how much she had changed since arriving. She could make decisions now. She could plan her day. She could dream about the future. The idea was thrilling and terrifying at the same time. Over the next few days, she threw herself into planning. She organized chores for the animals, set schedules for feeding and cleaning, and even started thinking about small improvements she could make to the barn and fields. Each plan she made felt like a tiny victory. Each success built her confidence. Meanwhile, her studies continued. She finished online classes she had once thought impossible. Reading about agriculture, animal care, and management made her feel like she was preparing for a life she could truly control. Knowledge no longer intimidated her. It empowered her. She realized that learning could be enjoyable, not just something to survive through. One afternoon, she sat near the pond, watching the reflection of the sky ripple in the water. Daniel joined her silently. "You've grown a lot," he said, not as a compliment but as an observation. Leela smiled quietly, knowing he meant it. He had seen her transformation when no one else had. He had guided her without controlling her, allowed her to fail and try again, and believed in her even when she doubted herself. Then came the moment that tested everything she had learned, the unexpected return of her father. He arrived quietly without warning. Leela froze for a moment, but instead of panic, a strange calm settled over her. She knew she was not the same girl who had once been afraid to speak. She was ready. He began talking immediately, his tone softer than before, but still firm. He asked about her life, about her work, and about her earnings. Leela listened carefully, then spoke. She explained what she had been doing, the skills she had learned, the responsibilities she had taken, and the plans she was making for her future. Her voice was steady. Her words were clear. She did not yell, she did not cry, she did not apologize for being herself. She simply told the truth. Her father paused, perhaps realizing for the first time that she had changed. He said nothing for a long moment, then nodded slightly. It was not a complete forgiveness, not a perfect ending, but it was acknowledgement. He understood that she was no longer the child he could control. That realization alone felt like victory. When he left again, the weight of the past months lifted in a way Leela had not anticipated. She could feel the sun on her face and hear the wind rustling through the trees, and the world seemed wide and full of possibilities. She realized that freedom was not just about distance from her father, it was about owning her life, her decisions, and her future. The following weeks were some of the most rewarding of her life. She experimented with new routines, tried planting new crops, and took small steps toward managing the ranch. Animals that had once seemed intimidating now trusted her completely. Horses nuzzled her hand, chickens followed her gently, and even the smallest tasks brought satisfaction. She understood now that care and patience could create harmony, whether with people or animals. One evening, Daniel asked her about her plans beyond the ranch. She thought carefully before answering. "I want to keep learning," she said. "Maybe continue education, maybe work with animals, maybe even teach someone else someday. But I want to choose, not because someone tells me to." He smiled quietly. "Then you're ready," he said. "You've built yourself here, and that's the strongest foundation anyone can have." Her confidence grew steadily. She no longer worried about judgment. She no longer feared failure. She learned that mistakes were lessons, that effort mattered more than perfection, and that respect for herself was worth more than anyone's approval. Slowly, she began to imagine a future in her own terms, free from the fear that had controlled her life before. The final test came in an unexpected way. A neighbor asked for help managing a small herd of animals for a few days while they were away. Leela agreed without hesitation. She led the work confidently, planned schedules for feeding and cleaning, and managed small challenges independently. The experience proved to her that she was capable of responsibility not just for herself, but for others too. That night, standing on the porch with the stars twinkling above, she reflected on the journey. She had arrived at the ranch frightened, unsure, and doubting herself. She had faced challenges, learned new skills, and gained confidence. She had confronted her father, established boundaries, and discovered a strength she had never known existed. Most importantly, she had learned to trust herself. Daniel stood beside her, quietly observing the sky. "You've earned this," he said softly. Leela nodded, knowing he meant more than the words suggested. She had earned her life, not through luck, not through anyone else's choices, but through her own effort, courage, and perseverance. The ranch, once a place she had feared, had become a home in the truest sense. It was a place of learning, growth, and safety. It was a place where kindness and patience had taught her the value of self-respect. And now she could imagine a future full of possibilities, not fear. As she walked toward the barn, the air crisp with the first hints of winter, she felt a quiet determination settle in her heart. The future was hers to shape. Every step she took across the fields, every decision she made, and every goal she set was a testament to the person she had become. She was no longer defined by fear, doubt, or someone else's control. She was defined by her choices, her courage, and her resilience.